Hey everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the feature race at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. It is race 10, the ladies turf sprint, going the 5 furlong distance on the grass course for the older fillies and mares. Mike, a field of 9 signed on for this race. Haven't yet seen the morning line, but I would imagine that a couple of the horses coming out of the Abundancia are likely to take money in here, including the winner of that race, the number 7, Just to Care, who changed up her running style that day to come from off the pace, and it really seemed to work first time out for the Brian Lynch barn. A repeat of that effort's going to make her tough.
Yeah, it really is. Switched to a pretty hot barn too. Brian Lynch there for the most recent start. Really ran well from off the pace there, David. We'll see if she can repeat it.
Yeah, she beat the number 2 Karaya that day. Interesting to see how much money the number 9 Beauty of the Sea takes. She's a horse that might have been favored in a race like this if it was run last summer, but coming in some questionable current form. Let's take a look at the Time Form US pace projector for this race to see how these fillies might sort themselves out towards the front end. And Mike, a little surprising to see the pace projector having the number 7 Just to Care on top, especially when you just appreciate her last race and the way she was able to rally from off the pace. But tough horse for the Time Form US data to really get a read on, because she had shown speed in 3 of her last 5 races, and quite good early speed at that. But given the way she ran last time, I doubt they're going to be as aggressive with her here. And she does have a fast horse in the number 8 Opponent's Hope drawn right to her outside.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. I'm a little surprised to see her up front there on the pace projector. But listen, I guess that's a good sign for her, considering the way that she just won her most recent start. You know she could be forward if that's where Luis Saez wants her to be, but she doesn't have to be there if they go fast in front of her.
Let's go through this field in order, beginning with the number 1 Blind Spot, a horse who, though trained by Saffie Joseph, was campaigned up in Canada for much of last year. From June on through October, made 5 starts at Woodbine on both turf and synthetic, switching back and forth. Did win against a weaker optional claiming field as the favorite 2 back, and then just no match for a tougher group in her last start, Mike. She's just going to have to improve on her Woodbine form to be a factor here.
Yeah, I mean, still a maiden on the grass on the way into this, and I don't really see the race that's going to make her ultra competitive against this field. We'll see how she does off the layout.
The number 2 is Karaya, who chased home the horse that might go favorite in here, Just to Care, in that Abundancia Stakes last time. She was rated towards the back of the pack. Another horse that's kind of changed up her running style over the course of her career, had a lot more speed early on, but came from off the pace to win a race, 2 back, and they used that same running style in that most recent start, and they really were going quickly up front. So I think it benefited her to be as far back as she was in that race. Did fire a good shot to get up for second, but was never really any match for the winner.
Yeah, he was never going to win that race, but ran fine in her own right. Got a sort of a similar trip to Just to Care, but was always behind that horse, and all she could do was sort of follow her and then chase her home. I thought she did so really gamely. An IRAD special, 2 starts back on the all weather. We just gave her a perfect trip up the inside, and she got the job done there. I do like the change of tactics. I think there is still plenty of room to improve here. And it does just sort of feel like these, 5 furlongs, this kind of feels like her distance, David. I think this is going to be the right race for her. And if she can do it from off the pace now, it just makes her that much tougher.
I think one of the more intriguing horses in this race is the number 3, Freedom Speaks, who, when you just isolate her sprint races on either turf or synthetic, she looks way more competitive and more consistent, because she's tried dirt a couple times, tried to go longer ones. That's clearly not really her gig. But her last race, Mike, in the Caress, I know she never really looked like a winner at any point, and she was beaten less than 3 lengths, but that could be a mile when you consider how fields get compressed on the turf. But she was facing some really nice horses last year in that Caress, some of the best in the division, quite honestly. And she was a little wide around the turn, stayed on decently for 7th. And she only had those 2 starts, both surrounded by a long layoff. But you go back to some of her prior races in 2022, where she won the Music City against a good field at Kentucky Downs. And yes, she has trouble staying on the racetrack. And yes, she's playing this game of musical trainers, but her best effort certainly puts her in the mix here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, her best effort makes her really, really tough in here, as a matter of fact. I'll be interested to see what she does here. Can this new trainer, who I don't know really anything about, can this horse do as good, or this trainer do as good a job as some of these other prior trainers, and have her ready off the long layoff here? It's a very limited work tab here for this horse on the way back. I'm not thrilled with that, but I do know this: she'll probably be. I feel like there's a chance she gets lost in the shuffle here a little bit and goes off at a good price, and she can beat this field.
Yeah, Heather Smolin, I believe, related to Robin Smolin, the longtime assistant to trainer Barclay Tagg. And I did watch this Phillies' most recent workout, mare, I should say, and she was much the best in company with another rival. So we'll see if she's ready off the layoff. The number 4 is Sinead, who is one of 2 Jorge Abreu trainees in this race, Mike. And she is just coming out of a New York bred maiden victory. Now, it was only the second start of her career, and it was certainly an improvement on her debut, which in itself was a better than looks effort. But she got a good pace setup that day, close down a field that was just much weaker than this one. It's a tough ask for her to try stakes company here.
Yeah, it's just not. I mean, I guess it's a good sign that Abreu's even going to enter her here. I guess that's some kind of a sign of confidence. I wouldn't just bet her off the maiden win that we just saw, though.
The number 5 is Shoshana, who is a horse who did show good early speed going back to some of her races in 2023 and even the early part of 2024. But since she came to Gulfstream in her last couple of starts, this 5 furlong distance, it can be pretty sharp for some horses. They might have speed elsewhere in turf sprints, but Gulfstream, they really fly down the backstretch of these races, and she just could not keep up in either of the last 2 races. And coming from off the pace is not really her style, Mike. So I just wonder where the winning trip is for her.
Yeah, it seems like it really works against her too, Dave, because when you go back to her prior good efforts sprinting on the grass, they're all when she was able to make the early lead. And I don't think she's going to be able to do that in here.
The number 6, Weekend Rags, is the other Jorge Abreu trainee coming in here, coming off a recent victory at Gulfstream Park, going this distance, but that was just an optional claimer first level allowance race, and she was beating a weaker field than this. Did so with a pretty good trip. She did run better than it looks to back at Aqueduct, where she got an impossible wide trip against a bit of an inside bias on the turf that day, Mike, but not sure how relevant that is to this spot because she really doesn't have any turf race that makes her competitive against an open stakes group like this.
Yeah, on figures, she's just not that competitive. It was a weaker field last time. I did like the finish that she put in to close that race down, especially the last 16th of a mile or so. She really kicked in and closed that field down in there, but she's just entered in a really, really tough spot here. She's going to have to hope they go fast in front of her and she can make one run.
The number 7 is Just a Care, who does feel like the horse to beat in this race. We'll take a look at her most recent start in the local prep for this, the Abundancia, where she was able to come from off the pace, and a horse who was a little wide on the turn, Mike. Seemed like she was traveling keenly, and Junior Alvarado did a good job of sort of keeping a lid on her because it seemed like she wanted to do more early in the race that he really wished she would do. And once he was able to unleash her at the top of the stretch, she just closed this field down and is able to hold off the challenge of Karaya, who we already talked about in this race. And the last 3 turf sprints that she's been able to finish, she's won them all, lost the jockey and a tough spot at Tampa Bay Downs a couple of years ago, and has had some trouble staying on the racetrack since then. But when she shows up, she is pretty good.
Yeah, she's just good. Yeah. And maybe she could even do a little bit better here because she's so lightly raced. That was a really nice win that we just watched there with a different running style. And you know that if she has to stay closer, then Saez can keep her closer. She's just easy to make a case for, David. And here we'll see what kind of price they're going to ask you to take. She'll probably be the favorite.
The number 8 is Epona's Hope, who was coming off a second level allowance slash optional claiming victory last time out at Gulfstream. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race. She's got a ton of early speed, Mike. She got right to the front end and just never gave anybody else in this field a chance. She was coming off a bit of a layoff this day, so now second off, we'll see if she can take a little bit of a step forward. I think she's going to need to, but that 87 buyer she earned doesn't put her that far off some of the main contenders in here. We've already talked about some of these speeds not exactly being confirmed frontrunners anymore. So maybe there is a scenario where she's able to get to the front by herself.
Yeah, maybe she is going to be fast enough to make the lead here, David. Even if she is, she's not going to get loose like she did in that race that we just watched. I mean, they just didn't go after her at all in that race. I realize the figure gives her some kind of a chance. I'm expecting this to be way, way tougher for her.
The number 9, Beauty of the Sea, I found to be a tough call in this race because she was in very good form in turf sprints last summer. Got some good trips along the way, but she beat a decent field in that Goldwood at Monmouth Park and followed it up with a stakes win at Colonial Downs. And yes, she's lost her last couple of races, not running quite as well, but they've both been on all-weather surfaces. And I don't want to be too hard on her for those losses, Mike, because when you just isolate all of her recent turf sprints, she makes her super competitive against this field. She just has to work out a trip from this outside post.
Yeah, I would just add, along with the surface of the last 2 races, they're 6 furlong races, and I know it doesn't seem like that big a deal, but there's a big difference between 6 and 5, especially for horses who really want 5. And there's a case to be made when you look at this horse's form that shorter is way better for her. David, I want to. She can win this race. I don't have her in there. We'll get the picks up there in a second. I don't have her in there, but I realize that I may be rolling the dice a little bit there because she's a wild card in here.
Let's throw up our picks for this ladies turf sprint on Saturday. And Mike, I agree with you about Justicare. She is just the horse to beat in this race. And I would argue this stakes might actually be a little softer than the one that she won last time. So if she runs as well, she'll be tough.
Yeah, I just like the way that she's spotted here. I like her overall form anyway, and I really like that most recent start we just saw. I'm just going to stick with that horse.
And I agree that she is the most likely winner of this race. I was just intrigued by the number 3 Freedom Speaks. I want to see what kind of price she is because I would need a decent number on her, but she does have back races that make her very competitive against this field. And if this new trainer can get her back to any of her prior turf sprints, I think that she is competitive with this group. So 3-7-9-2 for me and 7-2-3-6 for Mike in the ladies turf sprint race 10 at Gulfstream Park on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.